Before we let you continue here to see media queries, which really is um, the big bugaboo. If you thought the stuff in this chapter was big already, the media queries are even bigger still. So I know that that's unfair, but it's the way sometimes life works. I'm sorry to have to tell you here in a web class, but there it is. Here, the idea of progressive enhancement, it is not a it's not like a set of properties and values. It is a sequence of steps that you as the developer go through. With progressive enhancement, what we're essentially saying is you are developing your web page first in a way that your oldest browsers can view stuff. So the grid, like we'd mentioned 1,000 years ago at the very, very beginning of this particular chapter, the grid was not always a portion of CSS. The grid was not always fully supported by your browser. As a matter of fact, there are probably some of you who are still using an old browser out there that, if you were to see your page outside of the live window that, is running inside of Chrome, you would not be able to see some of the material here from chapter 8. And really, there's that old saying, the Navy is only as fast as its slowest ship. You as a web designer are kind of constrained by the oldest browser you expect to encounter. Those older browsers don't have the full set of functionality that our newer ones do, and the grid, for example, won't work the way we have it here in chapter 8. You would need to do the 2-column layout like you saw in chapter 7 by using container classes and container divs. And as a matter of fact, WordPress still does it exactly that way. Bootstrap still does it exactly that way. And that's fine. You could feasibly code web pages the way you do in chapter 7 for forever, with the inclusion of the media query. But other than that, you would never have to use the grid and you would get along just fine forever. It's nice, though, to be able to use that grid because it gives you a lot of shorthand. And when we rely on the browser, it makes your life as a developer easier. So what progressive enhancement means is, typically speaking, we would develop our web pages for the worst browser we expect to encounter. Internet Explorer, that's really what that means. Because Internet Explorer and our older versions of other browsers, Firefox, I'm looking at you, Chrome, I'm looking at you, Safari, I'm looking at you. The older versions of older browsers have quirks in them, and they respond better to div IDs and div classes with absolute, reference sizing or percentage references for sizing. Now, grid works great. So what progressive enhancement means for this is on page 288 and beyond, but essentially you would use what's called a media query. That @ is a media query. That's my CSS asking the browser, do you understand what I'm saying here? And if the browser says yes, supports, says yes, I'm able to use this grid function. If not, I'm not able to use this grid function. So here in 8.5, because I don't feel like it's necessarily crystal clear, what you're essentially doing, or this is 8.6, my apologies, it's 8.6. What you're essentially doing is you're taking the material we did in 8.5. You'll remember the wrapper, you'll remember our grid template. You're taking the grid template and you're putting it in an @supports selector. It goes right there inside of your style section. And if your browser supports that, great. It'll show what's in that @supports. If it doesn't support that, great. You can use your old, right? It was all of last week, but you can use the old material, classes and IDs from chapter 7 and build a page that way. So progressive enhancement, the way you see it here, is not a thing that you add. It's a thing that you do. It's a schema. It's a way of looking at how you develop web pages. So progressive enhancement means we take our worst browser and we code for that. And then we add all of our new nice material to that. And as you go on, you've developed for both the one or two clients you have that use your old unsupported web browsers and everybody else who's on a good modern device that sees things in a good modern way. You've left no one behind, and that's good web design.